2 waiting. We are live, boys and girls, with the second installment of the paper, Hot Springs Hypothesis by Deamer and Dahmer. And that's about all I got. That's about all I can handle tonight. How you guys doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's not like this hangout was just like spontaneously created.
I just haven't, I just got the memo.
I know. You were the one that told me like yesterday at like 3 o'clock in the morning, hey, we're doing this shit at like 7 CST. Okay.
I know it was my idea, but I just got the memo from my brain just now. So it takes a while to percolate, especially if the coffee cup is half full. Okay, so anyway, we were starting on section 2 of this thing, and there is a list of various things. And somebody want to hit the highlights on that list?
Sure. A key strength, this is the line just before the list. A key strength is the empirical foundation and weight of evidence that emerged over the past decade. And then this list is the key strength of his hypothesis. The first one is about amphiphilic compounds present in carbonaceous meteorites. In other words, the study they did of the 1969 Murchison meteorite, and that others have done. And at some point, I'd like to maybe see a list of other meteorites that have been studied and the contents of those, just to see how much the same and how much different they are, across the spectrum. But that would be cool. And then looking at a good analog of the early atmosphere and early geologic conditions by looking at this 3.5 million year old craton in Western Australia. And I'm still wanting Ian Chen to go out and get pictures of it. As described earlier, biological polymers such as oligonucleotides and oligopeptides are products of condensation reactions and can be synthesized when their solutions are exposed to wet-dry cycles. And once again, that's a core feature in this hot springs hypothesis, is the wet-dry cycles of organic content surrounded by these lipid vesicles. If lipids are present during the wet-dry cycle, polymers are encapsulated to form protocells. And once again, that's kind of a central idea of the protocell, which allows compounds to be randomly put together to then possibly form other compounds that become more abundant and more available to produce protolife eventually. The results or other forms of self-assembly may support key processes, and the results are not only confined to lab conditions, but have also been demonstrated in hot springs analogs of the Earth, and that's where Deamer and others go to various volcanoes and hot springs like in Yellowstone to see what's in there and to see what they can produce in nature, essentially.
Is it just me, or is it just me, or is this thing a little too far zoomed in?
No. There you go. What's that?
There you go.
Oh, actually, I was reading my copy of it the whole time.
Yeah.
Oh, I typically use whatever's being shared.
Yep. So I went and downloaded a few of these papers, and there's somebody's banging. There's Monard, I think, is the one that I got the picture for the video from, and they show a whole bunch of the structures that these lipids form in these wet dry cycles, which are kind of cool. And let me see if I can share that real fast. Share screen. And download a bunch of, there are a whole bunch of papers on wet dry cycles and what you can produce. And they're all very, very fascinating. StreamYard application. Let's see. Okay, this one. Well, it's interesting to see they took 400 power micrographs of a lot of these things that they formed after a while, and they found nucleotides in every one of them. And they started with a nucleotide or a mononucleotide, just one type, right? So they could track it. And then they use like decanoic acid, which is commonly produced in meteors and other geology. It's pretty easy to produce it. It's got 10 carbon atoms, and it's got like a what you might call a vinegar group or a carboxylate group on the end of it, and it's pretty simple, and it forms these. And then some of these, I think they use some more complicated lipids in some of these results. And then there's these, and these. Let's see what there's some other stunning pictures there. Trying to think of where the really fun ones were. I'm not sure which coupled phases. Not a second. Anyway, so there's all these different formations, and the interesting thing is that these lamella that they found, these stringy things, that form these flat plates, and then they rehydrate them, and then they turn into missiles again. They get circular, and it just goes on and on. So each of these is potentially a little test tube. So anyway, pretty cool. Let me share the original paper, and we can move on.
Yep.
I was just so jubilant over today's weather report that I had.
Precious. Oh, that thing was. Oh man, that was. Oh.
Like we made a lot of progress in the exposure of creationists for how they work. It's always very interesting. Anyway, so here we are in the paper, right? We're at this point.
Yeah. Let's see.
So,
yeah.
Once handled mutable.
Sure. Pools on land have access to multiple potential sources of biologically relevant organic compounds. 3 possibilities include the following: extraterrestrial infall in the form of meteorites, interplanetary dust particles, and impacting comets. Atmospheric synthesis of compounds such as formaldehyde and hydrogen cyanide that react to produce amino acids, nucleobases, and sugars, and geochemical synthesis of similar organic compounds as volcanic gases pass through hot minerals. The rates of meteoric infall 4 billion years ago delivered a much larger fraction of extraterrestrial material than today, including substantial amounts of organic compounds. Because oxygen was absent, organic compounds accumulated over long time spans than they would in today's oxidizing atmosphere. Whatever the source, if the organic compounds happened to fall and be dispersed into the oceans, they would form a very dilute solution. In contrast, those same compounds, let me see, where was I?
Let me go to the top. In contrast, okay, it's right at the top.
There you go. In contrast, those same compounds falling on or synthesized at volcanic land masses exposed to the atmosphere would become concentrated on the mineral surfaces, and then would be flushed into pools connected to hydrothermal systems, enabling their participation in prebiotically significant reactions. We assume that subaerial hydrothermal vents on the early Earth would resemble similar volcanic sites today. Carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide are major components of the volcanic gases and are weak acids when dissolved in water. Therefore, the circulating water in hydrothermal fields is moderately acidic, with pH ranging from 2 to 5. The concentrations of common cations such as sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium are all in the millimolar range, with accompanying anions of sulfate, chloride, and silicate.
Okay, James Stewart had that thing about them finding an oxygen atmosphere in some of the zircon crystals from what they thought were very early rocks.
Yeah,
and I haven't. I got the paper somewhere, but it wasn't. I think there were cycles, but where would the oxygen have come from?
That's a good question. I don't know how oxygen would be liberated in a prebiotic setting.
Yeah.
If there was oxygen, it'd be in very low amounts.
And then I think they found reducing atmospheres like this on Titan, I believe it was.
Now, for our audience at home, can you give a brief definition of what a reducing atmosphere would be?
I'm going to let Immutable handle that.
And let me look it up.
Well, non-oxidizing, so it doesn't have oxygen. It would be what would it be? Thank you,
Yeah,
Scott.
a reducing atmosphere is one where if you have metals, which oftentimes form metal oxides, a reducing atmosphere tends to remove oxygen from those compounds.
And
So,
oxidizing would add it.
yeah, precisely.
And for some of these abiotic synthesis reactions, a reducing atmosphere was desirable. I believe the one that created methane and more carbon compounds, and the oxidizing atmosphere created a different set, and that was Tour's main pushback on it. But then you got to ask yourself, how would we end up with an oxidizing atmosphere, and would it have always been that way? I mean, there may have been cycles, but I don't understand where it could have come from.
Yeah, so once life developed, photosynthesis would have caused a conversion from a reducing atmosphere to an oxidizing atmosphere.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe that's what they were detecting. Maybe they were detecting very early photosynthesis. Who knows?
It could be.
Could be.
But and that would mean the game was already over before the zircon crystal was formed.
Or the angels fart oxygen.
Yeah.
There we go.
So the beginning of the next line is the water is not stagnant, but
it instead circulates and undergoes multiple cycles of evaporation to a dry state in response to heat and low relative humidity, followed by rehydration from precipitation or periodic hot spring and geyser activity. The cycling frequency is as short as minutes when caused by geyser splashing, hours due to fluctuating levels of pools fed by pulses from hot springs, or days to weeks in cycles of evaporation followed by precipitation. Figure 3 shows a local scale illustration of geological structures related to volcanism and associated hydrothermal fields. Salty seawater is distilled by evaporation and falls as precipitation on terrestrial volcanic landmasses, where it forms hydrothermal fields associated with a hot spring, small pools, and geyser activity. The inset shows a small boiling pool at Bumpus Hell on. Okay, you just moved it.
Oh, I did. Damn. Cat. We got attacked by a cat. Where did I move it to?
It was about to name a mountain of some kind.
I don't even know where I was. Okay.
Up.
So I'm on 433. God, I'm totally screwed up, didn't I? What page are we on? 433. Put it up here.
Yeah. At Bumpus Hell on Mount Lassen, California, which is an example of dilute solutions that can undergo wet-dry cycles. Small freshwater pools like this can provide the Goldilocks conditions for prebiotic chemistry suggested by Powner and Sutherland 2011. These conditions incorporate variable chemical compositions and pH, mesothermic temperatures, access to extraterrestrial and atmospheric exogenous delivery of organic compounds, and an ability to undergo wet-dry cycles that support condensation reactions and encapsulate polymers. A downward flow of water driven by gravity would carry populations of protocells and early living cells on a journey through evolutionary time into new pools with novel conditions. They would adapt to dilute rivers and lakes feeding into salty intertidal zones, the marine shoreline, and the deep ocean. The varying pH and chemical composition of water bodies during this downward migration would select populations that are robust to dilution and salinity, and much later would be able to tolerate these extreme conditions of submarine hydrothermal vents. The scenario is treated in greater detail in section 4.
Yep. And here we have an illustration, which we will show. Okay. And this isn't quite the one, but optimal to extreme.
Yeah, that's the figure he's referring to.
The endolithic dilution, intertidal. So I mean, it gives you an idea of the different atmosphere. These illustrations are nice when you're talking about abiogenesis, rather than just talking about it, to see all the different conditions that they have, and they got a number of them. So anyway, we'll move on a little bit here. And I went down 1, 2, 3. Is that enough for you? Can you read it? Or you want one more up?
No? One more. Yeah, there we go. Scotty, you ready to do some? Or he looks like he's muted.
Scotty's muted. He can't see me a lot.
Yeah, let's see.
Gosh, I actually read so fast. I read the whole thing, so y'all need to catch up with me.
I know. Yeah.
Okay, this is where he criticizes and the idea that life began primarily through hydrothermal vents. As far as the significant chemical and biological propositions he makes, I don't know. Y'all might want to comment on that, but basically, he says it's probably because of the dilution effect and the acidity effect that it would be less probable for a kind of a deep sea origin, but that if protocells develop into life from a hydrothermal vent up on the land, the hot springs hypothesis, then they would have time to develop a skin, essentially, a thicker, more durable cell boundary. And if they made their way down into a hydrothermal vent at sea level, aka the way that extremophiles found their way into deep vents like that, then they'd be more likely to be able to form new kinds of life anyway. So he's saying that the best answer to how we got life down in the hydrothermal vents in the deep sea is because of hot springs. So anybody want to comment on the chemistry and the biological aspects of it?
Yeah, he mentions that some of the mineral solutions to it, what you need is a very, very, very narrow membrane, like 5 nanometers thick, rather than I think the other ones were millimeters. And he explains that if you want to generate energy, if you have a river flowing over a dam all at once, it'll turn a turbine. But if you spread that drop out over 15 miles, it's not going to turn a turbine very fast. So
yeah, that's one of the critiques he's giving towards Nick Lane when he postulates that an analog of the proton gradient would have been.
Yeah, here he is. Here he has the turbine analogy, basically. And let's see, what else was there? Be almost no energy available to an ATP.
I thought we were reading the paper through, but okay.
We can read. We can summarize some sections of it where we can. Scott's already memorized the entire paper, so we can just.
I have not made it through section 2, actually.
Well, so. I just thought Speed wanted us to summarize more than read this time around.
Either way, we can do a little reading too. Would not mind it, but do you want to go ahead and start reading at Milstein?
Sure.
Milstein.
All right, Milstein. Is it Milstein? Milstein described an alternative source of chemosiotic energy that can develop across lipid bilayer membranes 5 nanometers thick. If an electron acceptor, ferrocyanide, is present inside lipid vesicles and an electron donor, such as a reduced sulfur compound, is outside, quinones present in the Murchison meteorite can pick up electrons and protons from the donor, transport them by diffusion across the bilayer, and deliver the electrons to the ferrocyanide in the vesicles. The protons are released in the process, producing an acidic interior and substantial gradients over 2 pH units. An important goal for future research is to discover a process by which chemiosmotic energy can be used to synthesize the biochemical compounds necessary for primitive metabolism. Hypotheses for an origin of life must also propose that a cell-sized compartment is able to maintain sufficient concentrations of reactants so that metabolic reactions can be initiated. Proponents of the vent hypothesis have suggested mineral gels as an alternative compartment for prebiotic chemistry. While interesting chemistry has been performed in hydrogels, the products of reactions become trapped in the amorphous mineral matrix, whereas a gel composed of lipid vesicles can encapsulate distinct polymer sets that can interact with one another. Mineral cavities, ... Waiting for the next column.
Earth to speed. Stop salting your bacon sandwich.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm getting a delivery of banana bread, goddammit. Leave me alone.
Well, you're supposed to be focused on this paper for now.
Well,
Yeah.
I would choose banana bread over Deemer anytime.
Go on, Scotty. ...
Within vent rock formations have also been proposed to serve as compartments for primitive forms of life. Lane Martin, etc., etc. A recent report demonstrated that certain selected lipid mixtures could assemble into vesicles at 70 Celsius in the alkaline water of white smoker vents. Monard and Deemer also showed that specialized lipid mixtures could form stable membranes in seawater at ordinary temperatures and pH ranges. However, a plausible prebiotic source of such mixtures remains uncertain. As a general rule, the much higher concentrations of ionic solutes composing seawater inhibit self-assembly of membranous structures and encapsulation of polymers. This is not a problem for self-assembly of membranes in hot spring water supplied by precipitation with its much lower concentrations of ionic solutes. Lastly, the water activity within a submerged mineral cavity, gel, or vesicle will be at equilibrium with the surrounding ocean bulk. This presents a significant thermodynamic hurdle because in aqueous solutions, condensation reactions leading to polymer synthesis would require chemically activated monomers, such as the nucleoside triphosphates that drive biological metabolism or imidazole esters of mononucleotides used in the laboratory. So far, a plausible prebiotic source of activated monomers has not been established experimentally. Due to the aforementioned water problem, should any catalytic... Okay, I lost that place.
Right here.
Due to the aforementioned water problem, should any catalytic polymer, let alone one so complex as a primitive ATP synthase, be formed by chance in a vent environment without the constant repair and resynthesis by the enzymes of biology, it would soon be disassembled by hydrolytic decomposition. We do agree that mineral gels could have played a protective and structural role for the first protocell populations arising in hot spring pools, just as they do within microbial mats growing in Yellowstone National Park or Rotorua, I probably mispronounced that so bad, in New Zealand today. Silica gels also form hard mineral sinters. That's S-I-N-T-E-R, is that a word?
I don't know.
That have harbored the preserved evidence for life throughout the fossil record. The alternative offered, I'm sorry, what?
Let's find that word.
Can you do that? If only we had some sort of software available on a network where you could ask definitions of words.
Not if you haven't had the vaccination chip.
Oh, that's true.
Okay, make a powdered material coalesce into a solid or porous mass by heating it. Usually, okay, that would be like sinters would be what you'd find in the bottom of your fireplace. You clean it out, it has little chunks of ash. So that'd be like a sinter. So when moisture is removed from the slurry, the powder compact is sintered. Interesting. Okay.
Okay, somebody else is going to have to read because my dog's going crazy barking at something out on the street.
Okay.
Okay, we do agree that mineral gels could have played a protective and structural role for the first protocell populations arising in hot spring pools, just as they do within microbial mats growing in Yellowstone National Park or Rotorua in New Zealand today. Silica gels also form hard mineral sinters that have harbored and preserved evidence for life throughout the fossil record. The alternative offered here is that the microscopic membranous compartments, rather than minerals, served as a primary organizing matrix to initiate the first steps along the pathway to the origin of life. We also know that the downhill direction for life originating in freshwater pools on land and then adapting to salty seawater is opposite to the assumption that life began deep in the ocean and only later found its way uphill into fresh water on land. In our view, submarine hydrothermal vents represent a later adaptation for extremophilic microbial life that can thrive in conditions vastly different from the element pools in which life can begin. As we demonstrate next, it is the cycling of systems of polymers through distinctive dry, wet, and moist phases that can drive molecular evolution along the path to cellular life, a process that is not available in a continuously immersed environment.
Okay. So let's see. The central role of cycling is next, and so anyway, they're basically making the point that their lipid micelles were a better alternative overall on this part, right?
Yeah, basically. What they're also mentioning is that, look, if you're proposing something like a hydrothermal vent, right, that system's going to reach equilibrium rather quickly. And if you need activated nucleotide polymers or monomers to get that started, how is that going to work in a system that's constantly surrounded by water? Right? How is that system going to ever reach an appropriate concentration to transform these nucleosides, so a nitrogenous base and a ribose, into a nucleotide? The same thing essentially, except where where now you have a phosphate group attached. That's essentially the point that's being made. You still around? Hello? The central role of cycling. Energy-driven cycles are central to life's ability to maintain itself in a far from equilibrium state against the trend toward ever-increasing entropy. Therefore, it is reasonable to consider the possibility that life's origins also depend on cycles. Unlike an ocean vent setting, pools are subject to a rich variety of environmental cycles. If a mixture of amphiphils, for instance, monocarboxylic acids, stimulating those delivered by meteorites, is added to a hot spring pool, they form microscopic membrane-bounded compartments. These would also be mixed with other organic solutes, particularly amino acids and nucleobases, delivered by meteoric infall or synthesized by geochemical processes. An important point is that these potential monomers are not passive solutes, but instead are involved in a variety of chemical reactions that increase their chemical complexity. For instance, Becker et al. 2018-2019 established cycling reaction pathways by which all four nucleobases, nucleosides, and nucleotides can be synthesized in one-pot systems through wet-dry cycling. Nam et al. 2018 and Powner et al. 2009 describe surface conditions in which nucleosides, and nucleotides can also be non-enzymatically synthesized. These recent discoveries support the proposal that small freshwater pools are conducted for the assembly of polymers and protocells in the initial steps toward primitive life. Figure 4 illustrates how protocells can form and respond to cycles of dehydration followed by rehydration in a pool subjected to a regular drying and refilling. The process assumes that a variety of polymers are being continuously synthesized from monomers, such as amino acids and nucleotides, and that the system incorporates an indefinite series of cycles that pump the components far away from equilibrium toward a steady state in which the polymers are maintained in a kinetic trap. Significantly, cycling also drives a series of natural experiments that undergo combinatorial selection in the form of encapsulated polymers. We refer to this process as coupled phases, because during each cycle, polymers are synthesized and transferred or coupled between three distinct phases that involve the self-assembly properties of amphiphilic compounds. A multilamellar phase characterized by reduced water activity, a hydrated phase in which encapsulated polymer mixtures are butted off into protocell compartments into an aqueous bulk phase, and an intermediate hydrogel or gel phase in which surviving down a little bit. Speed, if you're trying to talk, I can't hear you.
Damn, I should unmute. Okay, so this is an interesting illustration that shows the phases. There's hydration, dehydration phases with this gel phase in the middle, which forms the multilamellar. There's a couple of ways to say that. And in the middle is a really interesting micrograph of some of these micelles and the lamella, which is interesting. And they have a paper that they refer to up here where who was that in the beginning? Can't remember which one it was. Was it Becker et al. That showed that the one pot solution or whatever?
Let me check. One pot. Here,
Yeah.
if you give me a second.
It's Becker. It's Becker.
Becker? Okay.
Yeah. That's one paper I did not download. Anyway, so let's see, and we'll continue with intermediate hydrogel, in which surviving, let's see, go down here, and I will make her bigger again. Wish there was some software for this. I think there actually is. It's called OBS, where you could actually automatically switch to bigger and smaller windows, that sort of thing. Anyway, go ahead. Protocells.
Yeah, there we go. Protocells, let's see, one sec. Protocells and conjugated solutes form a moist aggregate before drying and fusing back into a multilamellar phase. It is important to note that these polymers remain enclosed within various states of lipid encapsulation, analogous to solutions circulating within laboratory glassware. Each of these phases subjects sets of polymers to different forms of combinatorial selection. Figure 5 illustrates these forms through the cycling of polymer populations within the kinetic trap of the three distinct phases. Kinetic traps are defined as a steady state in which polymers accumulate because the initial rate of synthesis exceeds the rate of hydrolysis or other decomposition processes. Polymers are first subjected to selection through competition for monomers during their synthesis in the dehydrated lamella. During hydrous immersion, polymers are tested for their ability to survive their membranous enclosures. Protocell compartments surviving immersion are delivered into a gel aggregate as the pole dries down. This gel enables a protocell-to-protocell interaction.
We got a long thing. We'll move up here.
Yeah, let's see. The gel aggregate enables protocell-to-protocell interaction through a form of network selection and niche construction. The gel phase supports gradients of increasing concentration during drying, which would also promote the emergence of autocatalytic metabolic cycles. Protocells fuse, depositing their polymer cargoes back into two-dimensional lamellar volumes for resynthesis. The lamellae are not completely dry and immobile, but remain in a fluid state, so reactants can diffuse within the planes between bilayers. Monomers transition from a dilute disorganized
Oh, hang on a second. Okay, we're positioned.
From a dilute disorganized state into in an aqueous solution to a highly concentrated and/or organized state in the multilamellar lipid matrix. Because the water activity is low, ester bond formation is promoted so that polymers of nucleic acids are synthesized.
Okay. And that was our goal for tonight is section 3, but here is an illustration again.
Pictures.
Pictures. We like pictures. Okay. Gels and progenotes, protocells, gels and progenotes.
Progenotes and dosidotes and little lamb.
Yeah. Yes, I think this is a viable hypothesis. I don't know.
I think so. I mean, I think Demeter's hypothesis, along with this one, would be interesting to see a marriage between those two.
Right. And this has been fairly well tested. There's about 20 papers referenced in this section. A number of them are Deamer and Dahmer, and some are Deamer and some other people. And then there's some other independent ones. They go from about 2000 to 2020, all the way up to 2020. So they've done a lot of work on this and found a lot of compounds. And
how many references or citations has Demeter's paper got so far?
I'm not sure. I haven't checked.
We know.
Be interesting. But anyway, we have accomplished our goal.
I like these more chewable bite sizes.
Yeah. Go think about
I think
them.
an hour typically is chewable for people.
You know, we've achieved 100% viewer to like ratio, or like viewer ratio twice so far in this session.
Oh, no, we have 10 watching, so we have 2 more.
Yeah, we're down to 80%, but still, you know, that's not bad.
Two losers. So there are a number of papers. Let's see here. I wonder which ones we could look at. We got Monard, and that was the one I showed earlier. And that was, let's see, influence of ionic inorganic solutes on self-assembly and polymerization processes related to early forms of life. Now, in one of these, let's see, which one was it? I found one where they were talking about getting polymers from 30 to 100 regularly, nucleotides. So from 30 to 100 nucleotides. And Demeter stuff only needs 10 to get his thing going. But there's a couple of these that show, and I think famously some of our what should I call them? Our Bible thumping friends say that you couldn't get beyond 20. I think they said at one point that you couldn't get beyond 20 nucleotides, and that isn't the case with these papers that I downloaded that were referenced in this section. So
we have a question in chat by Don Giovanni. What do you think of the soft panspermia hypothesis? And from what I just looked up on Google, who basically gave you the Wikipedia result, it sounds like soft panspermia is included in the idea that dust from the solar system, as well as meteors and comets hitting the Earth, provided the organic compounds and other minerals that would be involved in these chemical reactions that we're talking about in the hot spring setting.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yep.
Yeah, sounds right.
And it's amazing how easily these things form, or how common they are in meteorites, and in out in outer space, how many of these biotic compounds can form. And I think there were like billions of tons of bombardment happening during the Great Bombardment per year. So it wasn't a small amount of material. But they've also found ways for them to form in the atmosphere and on rocks and everywhere else. So it seems like there's a reason why we have the nucleotides we have and the amino acids we have. They seem to be the most common.
Right, yeah.
And there again, that's what I started out with Otangelo today. I was telling him that the ribose being permeable to lipid membranes was a clue, because ribose is indeed what's used in the backbone. So it's odd that it also has a property that would make it easier to accumulate inside of these protocells. Okay, the same thing with these compounds that we're finding in meteors. It is really odd that those turn out to be the chemicals that are most important in life and most prevalent in all life. So there's a clue there, because there's no reason why the two properties should be the same, that sort of thing.
Indeed.
Unless God did it that way to fool us.
Yeah, we have Demeter now has popped up, and he makes the comment, hot spring environment is compatible with RNA peptide world. So that's cool to have diverging concepts like that. Not diverging, converging, excuse me.
So things I would like to check out, or I would love to have you check out, Immutable, is ribose and chirality. How many different isomers are formed in some of these reactions? One of them, let me see if I have that one. Do I have the paper on? In a second.
If you link the papers in the description bar, I'll look some of them up and see what I can find on it.
I've got them all in PDF form now. I no longer have the links, unfortunately. I can go dig them up for tomorrow and put them in there. But let's see, confirmation. Let me check this out. Video details. Okay, origins of building blocks. Oh. Nope, that wasn't the one. Sorry. Looking for something. Can't find it.
Oh well, find it later.
Yeah, I had a good article. Had a really good article on this with where they talked about ribose. But that'll be for another day.
You have to be really organized to find just the right article.
Well, I've got I think 11 papers on the screen here right now, plus 3 Google or Chrome tabs. Or 3.
I mean, wouldn't it just be so much easier if you could do things the way Otangelo does and pretend to read papers and not read papers and claim that biases are in the papers when they don't agree with what you're saying?
Yep.
Or just copy the introductory clause of a compound sentence and that's it.
Yeah, just pull a believe me, I'm telling the truth about this article, even though it's not really the result the paper actually states.
Where are the borates? The pre-RNA world. Riboferinol.
Are you saying borate or borite?
Borate.
B-O-R-A-T-E?
Yep. So borate. Let's see, abiotic synthesis. Here we go. Let me see if I can pop this up. Stop screen. Are y'all waiting for me? Whoops.
I'm waiting.
Yeah, I'm looking at this paper. Earlier I'd asked, well, gee, I wonder if there's a kind of a complete study of what compounds have been found in meteorites that have been studied overall and not just that one Murchison meteorite. So I think I found a paper to address that, but I'd have to look at it closer.
Well, that'd be interesting. I mean, it'd be interesting to get some more perspectives, like in the astronomy.
This one here shows the permeability of ribose and ribulose, and let's see, permeability in these various lipids. I don't know if you can see it. It probably isn't big enough. Make it a little bit bigger. But anyway, you see the ones that are circled, it's very high for ribose and permeable in all of these different types of membranes. So that was interesting. And then we have, let's see, chemistry of abiotic nucleus. Here we go. Background. Was that the...
What is the paper it's referencing called?
This one is not a paper. It is a kind of a website. And let's see, what does it look like? Oh, this is the one with the borate stabilized. Okay, this is the one with the borate stabilized ribose. They form tars apparently fairly easily, and that's one of the criticism. And this borate stabilizes it, and that is quite common in early Earth as well. And this is just a synthesis from, I forget what it's from, minus. Let's go down to the point where we can actually see the whole thing. Let's see here. Glycoaldehyde and formaldehyde, basically. And borate. It's a pretty simple synthesis, and it creates ribose. But I was wondering what the isomers of this were, and whether or not you see that borate down there. I wonder if that directs the isomer, or makes one isomer purer than another. I don't know. It'd be something worth looking at.
The interesting aspect of that, though, is that if it were to favor its own formation over something like its cousin like the except, well, here's the thing, right? If it were to form more of itself in comparison to the phosphorus version of it, right, you would have borodiester bonds, not phosphodiester bonds.
Yeah, what is this? Is that the Furanose form, or is that, I forget, with Carlisle?
Furanose, I believe, is 5-member ring. Don't quote me on that, though. I think it's 5-member ring.
Yeah, so it's the Furanose form is more likely the one that forms the phosphates, the one that forms nucleotides. So
Yeah,
and it's interesting that the more we look and the more you dig in the papers, the more you find things that would direct one compound over another. And there's just a lot of clues like that. And it'd be worth creating a giant, that's something we can put into our website, Science and Naturalism, is all the little clues that have popped up that tell you that for every, the idea that it's random, it's not random. There are directed pathways to all of this stuff. And that is the point. Anyway, section 2 talked about a directed pathway with the wet-dry cycles. And the wet-dry cycles also fit Demeter stuff very well, which is quite interesting.
Demeter says in the comments that the 2018 paper of his was cited 10 times so far.
10 times.
That's pretty decent. I mean, so it is getting some attention within origin of life studies.
Yep. And as we go further, maybe we'll get more. So,
well, this paper on the meteors looks promising. I was hoping it would show a combined chart, but it's breaking down individuals pretty well. So that would be something good. I'll put it in the drive here eventually.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. We'll do section 3 next. So we should go out and study, and I will try to link as many of these papers as I can in the description. And some of these websites, particularly this one, Abiotic. Let's see, what is that? Where did this come from? Libertex? Abiotic synthesis of sugars, which is worth looking at. I'm sure you'd like that one, Immutable. So
I'm sure.
And we will get on it. We'll get on it as soon as we're off the air here. Okay.
Sounds great.
Ready to end?
We're done.
Okay, guys. Goodbye, cruel world.
Viewers. So thank you, viewers.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for all those likes. That like ratio is good. Keep that up. Don't let me down. Any broadcast.